month into being around there and auditioning, and I garnered a sort of a New York, primarily musical theater agency through UCLA's showcase at the end that happens at the end of our senior year. Um, and so I was, felt prepared and ready to jump into the professional world in New York with that agency, and again, just being prepared for whatever auditions would come. And that led to a new production called Superhero with Tom Kitt, who wrote the music. Directing was Jason Moore, and it was a crazy team, a crazy production. I mean, if you guys know, Next to Normal was written by Tom Kitt as well. And I mean, he's worked on a number of things. And so just to, again, this iconic sort of composer that I've looked up to for a while to be my first professional New York experience was very exciting. And yeah, so we did that off Broadway at Second Stage Theater in New York, and didn't have a large part, but again, I was just so excited to be there and be working. And again, this was one of my first auditions upon getting to New York. So it was really just amazing to be able to jump right in. And I was very fortunate for that, which then slowly but surely led into sort of my most recent project, which was Anastasia. And that we did, I don't know, raise a hand if you've seen it at the Segerstrom. Did you come to the Segerstrom or anywhere else in the world? Or the Pantages obviously was super close there. Yeah, I had a great time doing that, and I'll talk more about that later. But I wanted to jump into talking about being in LA for those 4 years. I was able to sort of integrate myself into that world, and especially growing up here, I grew up and I was thinking about like, oh wow, like LA, like Los Angeles, Hollywood, like it was a dream to me, truly, and I had only images of what it looked like in my mind. And I was always so excited to eventually go over there. And my first introduction to Los Angeles as a city was my sophomore year of high school. I did a summer theater program at UCLA. It's called SAPI now. I totally also recommend it for anyone in high school currently. Because it is a great program, and sort of, again, just got me prepared for college auditions, namely also, and just, again, just more training and getting more, knowledge in there in terms of acting. But it was a great program, and that was sort of my first introduction to college, I mean pre-college, but UCLA as a university, and also just Los Angeles. And I truly wasn't disappointed, and it was a dream to sort of see that in its glory growing up here in New York, finally to get to see it. But yeah, so I want to talk about sort of what I learned and picked up on while being in Los Angeles, and sort of the opportunities to sort of take advantage of as a theater performer or again, not even just a performer. They hire all sorts of theater artists. So I'm going to start with sort of like the big boys in terms of, I mean, there's theaters in Los Angeles. Namely, there's the Center Theater Group, which is a great group. Some of you might have heard of it, but it's a series of 3 theaters, one being the Amundsen, the Mark Taper Forum, and the Kirk Douglas Theater. I also have this all out in writing. I can also type it up and sort of maybe send something to Tammy if that's if people want some of this later on. But the Amundsen is typically a tour theater, so that's where the tours will come through, as well as the Segerstrom, the Pantages, and if we're going down to San Diego, the Civic Center. But those are sort of the larger tour theaters in Los Angeles. Sometimes they'll do new works, but it's not always typical. It'll typically be the tours that come through there. But in terms of the Center Theater Group, at the Mark Taper and the Kirk Douglas, they'll do a lot of new theater works there. And I was fortunate to audition for some pieces that were either going to one of those theaters or going to be a part of those theaters. And that's really exciting to be involved in new works like that, because again, they are typically these New York based or even Los Angeles based creative teams that are working on new musicals, again, potentially for Broadway, tryouts. And that's brings me to another sort of cool thing, is that a lot of these theaters will try out Broadway shows, and they're called out-of-town tryouts. And with those, they are very exciting because it's, again, where these new pieces by these sort of well-known or up-and-coming teams, creative teams, can workshop their shows and work on their shows. And to be a part of that is, I think, very exciting and very cool, because you're creating these characters, and that's, I mean, something very exciting that I got to do, particularly in Superhero, was create this character of Dwayne that I played, and I think that's very enriching and exciting to get to do as an actor, because you get to make the choices of what this person, how this person sounds, how this person walks, how this person talks, and all these things. And as an actor, that's really exciting to get to do, as opposed to, I mean, a role like Dmitry, naturally, in Anastasia that I played. I'm creating a character that was already created. And, there's an extent to which that as an actor, you want to bring yourself and your interpretation of the character to the stage, so that you're breathing your life into it. But at the same rate, there is sort of a set out, literally on paper, and again, I'll get more on that later, but literally on paper, a mapped out, like, this is what the character is, and this is how it walks, talks, and all those things. But yeah, and also even going off of, I'm sure you guys know the movie, the animation film. That was, again, another instance, obviously a animated one, but where I, was another means to draw off of the character and to create the character. But back to LA theater opportunities. So yeah, but out-of-town tryouts are a big thing and are really exciting to be a part of. And a lot of that time they'll cast out of Los Angeles and New York for out-of-town tryouts. Because again, and I think it's almost more exciting to be a part of those, because then at the same rate, you will then possibly be included in when this show goes to Broadway, because at the time that they're creating this and creating these characters, if they love your interpretation, your energy, your whatever that you bring to this character, then why wouldn't they want, you to come to Broadway? And so even, as a professional actor nowadays, I try to and encourage my agents to submit me for, out-of-town tryouts, even if they're all the way in Los Angeles. There's ones in Boston. I mean, for example, the Anastasia was originally, its out-of-town tryout happened in Hartford, Connecticut, and it started at the Hartford stage, and then went to Broadway after that. And a part of that out-of-town tryout was, namely, I mean, Derek Klena, and I believe Christy was involved too. So they went straight from that out-of-town tryout to the Broadway cast. Obviously, Derek Klena had more credits, even in his career prior at that point, but Christy did not have that many. So it was exciting that, again, she got to really jump into the Broadway show as, again, the title character. Other out-of-town tryout theaters that I've seen a lot of, or do a lot of out-of-town tryouts in Los Angeles, are La Jolla Playhouse down in San Diego, and the Old Globe as well. they're another two big ones. There are probably other ones that I'm missing, but those seem to, again, do a lot of new works, typically more high profile, out of town tryouts for Broadway. To talk more about out of town tryouts, it's trying it out for Broadway because they're in smaller theaters, and they like to, producers and creative teams like to see how the show fares in smaller theaters, and does it do well? And again, also is a part of the development process, creatively, for the project. But a lot of it is like saying, okay, can this actually hang on Broadway? It's hard to hang on Broadway, mostly because it's very hard to stay in these theaters and to, I don't know if you guys just saw today, but I mean, granted we're in the pandemic, but Mean Girls will no longer be returning to Broadway, which is sad. Another one bites the dust, but they will still have the tour company be going probably to the Siegerstrom and to the Pantages and such. But those are sort of the larger theaters. There are some other larger ones, but I have a bunch of also just well-known regionals, regional theaters, which again put on fantastic productions, but they're a little more like smaller base, smaller theaters, and are great for high school and even younger actors to get started in the Los Angeles theater scene. But some of those are Laguna Playhouse, Pasadena Playhouse, the Geffen, the Geffen Playhouse, which is right actually by UCLA's campus. I saw a bunch of amazing shows there when I was at school at UCLA, and that's just a really fun theater. La Mirada puts on fantastic productions. 3D Theatricals, which was formerly, I believe, the Cerritos Performing Arts Center, or I guess that's just the theater that they perform at. And Musical Theater West is a great company, and then 5 Star Theatricals. These are ones that I just had a bunch of friends during college do a bunch of shows at, and some of my friends who grew up in the Los Angeles area did a lot of these theaters as well, in high school and prior. 2 more, Candlelight Theater and Moonlight Theater. Candlelight Theater is actually a dinner theater, which is super fun. And anything, more intimate like that, I think is always exciting. I'm a big proponent of immersive theater, and space specific theater. It's really cool stuff, and there's a lot of emerging groups in Los Angeles particularly that are doing a bunch of cool immersive stuff. But yeah, like dinner theater, and again, this is a short list of theaters in Los Angeles and in San Diego, or Northern California. I don't know a lot of the ones up north, towards San Francisco and stuff like that, but there are obviously so many more. But I encourage you to do your research in terms of finding your local theaters and what they're doing. Obviously, there's not a lot of theater right now, and I sort of should have started with that and sort of saying hey guys, we're all in this together. I'm glad that we can do things like this, where we can even connect and talk about theater, because it's been a minute. I haven't been doing much either, in sort of coming out of being on tour with Anastasia. It's definitely a hard time for all of us. But I mean, Ratatouille the musical, who watched? Raise your hands if you watched. I watched it. Ratatouille was very exciting, and just cool that, again, we can still come together during this time to create theater. That's sort of the theater realm. Obviously, Los Angeles has film and TV, and that was something particularly when I was coming to, UCLA, I was like, I want to integrate myself into that world too. And I, did some TV spots while I was in Los Angeles there for school. Again, I really tried to focus on school and not the outside world just yet. But yeah, I mean, just to name just the studios, again, this is like, I think, common knowledge in Los Angeles, but maybe it isn't. But the big five studios that you'll really see in Los Angeles that again put out the majority of the TV shows that you know and love are Columbia / Sony Pictures. You have 20th Century Fox, Universal Studios, Warner Brothers, and Paramount. There are so many others, and even nowadays, again, like with the streaming services, like you have Netflix, Amazon Studios. I got an audition today for an Amazon Studios series, and it really just comes up a new production company every day. So there are so many different people putting out content. And I think the beautiful thing about Los Angeles is that there's so many people involved in the industry that, I mean, nowadays, as sort of, an adult, I put that in quotations because I'm 24, I still feel young. But even nowadays, it's like my friends are just all kind of involved in it. And we're like, hey, you wrote a script today? Oh yeah, I can direct and I'll act in it. And, it's kind of, you just bring your friends together. And I really encourage you, even as, young artists, to just bring your friends together and make content. And things like, TikTok and YouTube and all these things where you can put out content and get it seen, even without being, signed to a production company or having a formal director or anything like that. So I really encourage you guys to do that. But I'm going to segue into, it's a hard segue, but I'm going to segue into Anastasia now and sort of just talk about tour a little bit and what a national tour entails and what it is like. But again, if anyone has any more questions about, I have my little notes here. If anyone has more questions about like Los Angeles theater and stuff like that, or just Los Angeles entertainment industry and stuff like that, I'm going to leave a little time at the end for questions and such. But Anastasia, it was super fun, super exciting. Again, my sort of first big professional experience. I played leads in college and high school and regionally 100%. But this was sort of a big sort of beat change into the professional world of performing. I don't know. And I don't know, to talk about, let's talk about the Broadway versus tour for a second. Which there are obviously differences. Broadway is obviously typically in New York. And, a lot of the time obviously doesn't involve moving. And the big thing, I think the big difference with tour is we're doing the same schedule, which is the 8 shows a week. But we also will travel in that, time, which is, I think, if anything, more of a grueling schedule. I think, I got a little bit of the taste of a Broadway schedule, even though I was doing an off-Broadway show in New York. We still did the 8 shows a week. And I didn't have a huge part. So at the same rate, it was just like, I got a taste of that schedule, but I wasn't necessarily tired out by it just because I wasn't doing a grand amount in the show. But I can only imagine doing a show like Les Mis or Dear Evan Hansen, and doing that 8 shows a week, and it's definitely more grueling. But having the sort of part that I did in Anastasia, it was really interesting to learn that, and I think it's one thing that they don't necessarily teach in college or before college, and I think it's very important to know is that it's a schedule, and it's very hard, because I think the longest runs that I maybe did prior to Anastasia was a couple of weeks, and I feel like that's how shows typically run when it comes to high school, college, and regional theaters. And and you're not doing the 8 shows a week. And I think, again, it's something that you have to be prepared for, and also just take care of yourself. And I talk a little bit about that as well. But I'm going to talk about the audition process real quick. The audition process in New York, and what it's like to audition for like a Broadway national tour, or again, a Broadway show for that matter, because basically the same. For replacements like this, and I was, because I was replacing Dmitry. Before me, it was Stephen Brower. And in replacing, it's definitely a similar process of auditioning, but there are probably less rounds. When you're originating a new musical, particularly, there would be a lot of sort of callbacks and doing more material, learning more material and stuff like that. For Superhero, namely, I had to learn a lot of the material because I was also, even though I played a small role, I was covering the lead of the show. And so I had to do all this material and sort of, again, develop this character under my interpretation. So there was a series of callbacks in order for the casting director and creative team to get to know me. But for Anastasia, it basically starts out typically with just the casting director, which at this point was Telsey & Co. Telsey & Co., write that down, put it on your refrigerator. They are a very big casting company for musical theater in New York and Los Angeles, and film and TV. They really are just a great casting agency, but they do that. They do a lot of the Broadway shows in New York, being also Anastasia. And so first round is typically just the casting director. Any round after that, they will slowly but surely start inviting team members, creative team members, which will include the composers, the director, anyone involved in the creative aspects, as opposed to the production side. Production side is a different team. They are basically the money of the show, and don't necessarily have too much creative input depending on their contracts, but they have creative input into the show. But essentially, there was a series of 2 rounds for me. I was surprised in my first round of the show, of my audition, was Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens were there, and which are the original composers of the show. So that was wild to me, and because I really didn't think they would be there for that first initial audition. But after that, the second audition, or the callback, had Darko at it, who was the original director. And I think what was really exciting in that, it being a replacement, particularly after the show has already had a life, especially on Broadway and for a year on tour, to see the original creatives of the show and still, them being involved in the casting process. Because I think nowadays, particularly for shows like Wicked, Phantom the Opera, these are teams and creative teams that have been around for years. The odds of seeing Stephen in my audition for Wicked is very slim. I don't think I'm going to see the original composers or the original directors, just because Wicked's been around for a long time, and typically it will be associate teams, associate directors, associate composers, and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just a quick 2 rounds, and I got a call about a week later that I had booked the show, and that was very exciting. And leading up to that, it was definitely scary because I'm like, okay, I'm sort of on the younger end. I'm the youngest Dmitry to jump in, and in a replacement, typically you have, by equity standards, about a 2-week rehearsal process. And I don't know about you guys, but I was used to like a month of rehearsals and stuff like that, with my high school productions, my college productions and stuff like that. So I'm thinking 2 weeks. Oh no, and it was definitely nerve-wracking. So obviously what comes into that is preparation. I was given the material before. Hilariously enough, I was actually given the wrong material. I was apparently given the wrong script, version of the script before I got to the show. And so I had learned that one. And then I got there and I'm saying lines that didn't exist anymore in the rehearsal process. And we had to figure that out. But nevertheless, I had about a month or two before I actually joined the tour in San Francisco for the beginning of my 2-week rehearsal process. And yeah, I just learned, again, the script and all the songs to the best of my ability. They obviously sent me anything I needed in order to do that, but a lot of it was self work. And I thankfully had a friend, because I don't really play the piano. So I had a friend with me that summer that was able to really run through the songs with me and such before I left for San Francisco. But it was a quick 2 weeks, again, of just working with the original director and the associate director on building this character. Part of replacements also is that you get one put-in rehearsal. A put-in rehearsal is one rehearsal where you do the show and on a stage with the costumes and with everything. Everything else, a part of my rehearsal, was in a rehearsal room in a studio, just running lines with the associate director and Lila Coogan, who was playing Anastasia, and Ed Sudemeyer, who was playing Vlad. I had about 1 or 2 rehearsals with them physically in the studio. Because again, keep in mind, they were also doing the show every day. So equity laws, they were only allowed to, also equity is equity is the Broadway union, essentially. It's basically just a work union that actors are a part of. And depending on if a show is non-equity or equity, depends on these laws that they have to follow. More on that later. Maybe not, but there's so much you can go into on equity. But yeah, I had about 1 or 2 rehearsals with Lila and Ed, and then had my one put-in rehearsal in San Diego, which was week 2 of my rehearsal process. And then, boy, oh boy, I did not know I was gonna open originally at the Pantages in Los Angeles. They told me obviously weeks in advance that was going to be the thing, but I would have never dreamed that it would be that upon booking it. But that was very exciting. Pantages, obviously, while I was at school, and just knowing the history of this, large, beautiful theater in the center of Hollywood, like it really was really special. But at the same rate, scary. And I think, that's something that I think gets overlooked a lot of the time. It's like you'll be in Zooms such as this with other professional actors. Yeah, I like to believe I'm a professional actor, but again, I'm a theater student still. I'm learning, I'm growing, I am still figuring things out, just as I'm sure all of you are. And it's okay to, be scared. I was definitely nervous. It was funny. We were doing interviews the day before. There was a lot of press for the opening of Los Angeles, because it was also technically the opening of year 2 of the tour. And I'm waiting my turn to do a press, thing on camera. And Lynn Ahrens is also there because they came to see the show. So Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty were there, and the whole original creative team of everyone of all these shows that they wrote when I grew up, I was like looking up to them. And again, iconic idols in the musical theater world. Once on This Island, Ragtime, truly so many musicals came out of these beautiful individuals. Lynn Ahrens is over there standing. I'm waiting my turn for my little interview. And Lynn comes over and she goes, "Jake, you look very calm for tonight." And I'm like, I'm ready, I think. I don't know. Obviously I was prepared. I was as prepared as I was going to be. And I think that's as much as you can do. And you have to give yourself permission to shine. And I think that's, a hard thing for a lot of performers, is to be able to give themselves the permission to seize their moment and to, again, do the best that they can do. And that's all you can do. I mean, my mom will say that time and time again, is that, she's here today. So, it's like, you just have to do the best that you can do. And part of that is, again, preparation and being prepared when the moment comes, when you book, Anastasia National Tour and the openings in Los Angeles at the Pantages. So that's what I can offer there. What else? I have my little notes just to check in. Oh, and again, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I mean, I feel like that's a big thing that will help you grow and learn. I did Pippin I played Pippin in college, and I look back on it, and it was a great production, and we did, again, like a week's show. But there was one show where, I think Corner of the Sky is one of the first songs I ever learned as a musical theater artist. And there was one show that I skipped an entire verse. And, whether it be adrenaline, whether it be excitement, and this was probably my junior year of college. So I was like, with it and ready. And I mean, arguably ready to jump into anything professional at that point, hopefully. But I felt like, I'm going to give this good professional production level of Pippin. And I skip a verse. And I'm thinking, oh my God, and at the same rate, then I get up on the stage at, the Pantages singing My Petersburg, a number that's already nerve-wracking enough. And then don't miss the verse. I don't know. I think, again, and even if I did, and there were, a number of mistakes that, happened, dropped lines and little things. And there, as much as Broadway and national tour, we try to do perfection, obviously, every night, depending on what's on the page for the musical. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, whether it be, brain farts, and everyone's human. That's the thing. And so it's like, you can't give or put too much pressure on yourself for being perfect. But thankfully, opening night at the Pantages went well. But again, it's like, I learned from little things like missing the verse in Corner of the Sky in Pippin my junior year that I can carry through, with me to later. And then again, the big thing about tour as just a schedule is being able to, maintain health, sleep, water. And that's the big thing about traveling is, so typically we would be in cities for mostly just a week. And different tours vary. Ours was a CETA tour, which is, again, just the contract that we have. It just stands for basically short engagement touring agreement. And that typically entails sometimes just a week stay in certain cities. And so we're doing 8 shows a week. And then on Monday, which is supposed to be our day off, is when we travel. So we'll travel on that day off and get to the next city that day. And you have to, again, pick up the next day, Tuesday night, and do another 8 shows that week. So in order to keep your health up and to keep your, brain going, it is very important to, again, drink lots of water and get your sleep and be prepared to, again, do the 8 shows while also traveling. And I mean, the big thing also we had to keep in mind was different climates. We went from Los Angeles to Arizona, which, I mean, Los Angeles has its own means of being dry, but Arizona was very dry. We had little tips and tricks of like what we had to do, namely putting a wet towel in the hotel. Granted, we stay in hotels most of the time. And that's also something to be adjusted to, is like, figuring out how to live in a hotel and travel with all your things. I have here, I have my little Anastasia, trunks here that you basically keep your whole life in for however long you're on tour. And so, but we put a little towel on the radiator in Arizona, because then it releases moisture into the room. And that was, again, just one tip and trick to keep your voice, healthy and good to go for an 8-show week, wherever you are. And then even still, again, not being perfect, I was very sick in Canada. We were in Toronto for 6 weeks, and I must have, picked up what may have been Corona at the time, or just the flu. But I was very sick towards the end of Canada. And again, it was just, you had to figure it out and keep going without obviously getting anyone else in danger. So I did sit out some shows to make sure that I could, get better and jump back in. But I want to leave some time for questions, but I'm going to say 3 more minutes of just advice. Sort of, it is just like little advice that I can, I guess, impart on you guys, which is, I think the big thing for leading up into a profession or wanting to do this is just getting involved, getting practice. I feel like the majority of the time when I was a kid, I was always either involved in a show or trying out for shows or, working on monologues, little things like that, where I can just feel ready to, again, jump into a thing like Anastasia. And I think that was, partly why I was like, okay, I'm ready. I've done something like this before, other than the schedule, which is, I think, the big difference from professional versus, childhood or, adolescence. And I think that was I was very prepared. So yeah, I think get involved as much as you can. And that's the big thing. And then in terms of really becoming more, I guess, serious, professional, and ready for the real world, getting involved in sort of more larger steps like college programs, which then also leads to showcases. I also know college is very expensive. And so there are many other ways to get involved, to get agents, being agent workshops. They have them in New York. They have them in Los Angeles. There are musical theater agents in Los Angeles. There are obviously musical theater agents in New York, and casting director workshops. Casting director workshops also happen in Los Angeles and New York. Very pivotal to create relationships with these casting directors, because they are the ones who pick up the phone to call you or your agents about the auditions that they have. And that's really the first line of defense there. Casting networks, backstage, actors access, actors equity if you are a part of the union, and casting network. These are all casting websites that post casting information. When a casting notice comes up, that is where they will be posted, and you can sign up there. In that, you want to be prepared for all of these, which will include, headshots, resumes. These are things that, casting directors like to have. Resumes just being your previous work, what you've done. Even if it is, amateur theater, regional theater, it's still good to have it on there. Because again, everything counts. Because I think, again, everything is practice. Everything is, you are out there, you are working on this stuff. Books are nice to have, meaning musical books, having little 16 to 32 bar cuts of your favorite musical theater songs that you can sing and, kill and do whatever you got to do in an audition room with it. Having a good book is very helpful, because when you walk into, a New York City or Los Angeles room, you're able to, again, provide for whatever the casting director or the project needs. Yeah, and I think those are sort of the main preparations for those auditions. Auditions vary from open calls to appointment calls. Open calls will be essentially, they'll post it on the casting networks and it'll say, show up at this certain time. There will also be a lot of people showing up at that time. But you put your name down and you get seen to sing, again, your 16 to 32 bar cuts, sometimes less, depending on how many people are there. But but it's pretty grueling in New York in terms of getting up at 3 or 4 a.m. to put your name down on a list that you might never get seen for. And I think that's sort of also the hard truth about New York and about things. It's not that as bad in Los Angeles, but I think it's just very interesting, the different dynamics in each city. But yeah, those are sort of the main sort of things in terms of getting involved in as much as you can. But leading up into like where you guys are now, I'm assuming most of you guys are around high school age, if not younger. Just getting involved as much as you can and getting, again, as many performance experiences as you can. I'd like to take the last, 7 or so minutes here, if we can, for questions, if that's something that people have. If they don't, I can still keep talking. I don't know. But if anyone has any questions, please, you can either type it in the chat or you can just sort of raise your hand, unmute. I don't know. How do you want to do it, Tammy?
Well, Isabella had emailed in a question. So do you want to go ahead and ask it, Isabella, or do you want me to just read it?
I can ask it. My question was, if there was something different, like starting off in your career, what would you change, if anything?
That's a good question. I always try to live by the no regrets kind of thing. When I was applying to colleges, I was really stuck between two programs, being UCLA and Michigan, University of Michigan. And both of them are great musical theater programs. And I was really stuck between that decision for a long time. And there were days when I was at UCLA when I was like, oh, man, what would I, whether it was a bad day or a good day, I'd be like, what would I be doing at Michigan right now? And what would I be learning and stuff like that? But I thought about that and I'm like, I'm not supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be learning what I'm supposed to be doing and, here, and I'm, that is how it's supposed to be. Likewise, I guess just jumping into career, it's like, I also went back with back and forth with the decision of whether or not to go to New York right away after graduating UCLA, or stay in Los Angeles for a little bit for film and TV stuff and Los Angeles theater stuff. I ended up going to New York for the first couple, 2 months. I had really no auditions. I was like sitting here, not doing much. And I was like, oh man, maybe I should have stayed in Los Angeles. And then again, Superhero came up as an audition and it happened. So no, I wish I had learned to dance better. I wish I took dance classes. Please get in dance classes if you're interested in musical theater, because wow, I wish I could dance. I really just cannot. And I, again, studied it in college as much as possible, but not one of my strengths by any means. So
there's a question in the chat from Anthony.
Yes.
He's wondering how you learned that towel trick.
How did I learn that towel trick? That towel trick actually was told to me by I guess it was the production manager at Anastasia. He sort of said, guys, I've been here before, because a lot of them have been doing a bunch of tours prior. So they're like, guys, I've seen this before. Everyone put a wet towel on your radiator. It will help. So that's where I learned the towel trick. But now I always try to have a humidifier around. I also kept one in my dressing room because that was, again, in some of these cities, especially when it got colder in some of the cities that we were in, it was nice to have a humidifier and sort of some means of heat.
Yeah.
I have a question.
But yes.
What encourages you to continue in theater every day, or continue to want to keep doing it?
That's a good question. I think I, as I'm sure a lot of you experienced, the thrill of performing. I mean, it's something that, again, started at age 10 when I did that first show in New York. I don't know if I talked about that show at all, but it was an off-Broadway show, which was, again, very exciting. but it was a musical, and I was just so excited about that world and being on stage. And I think the exciting thing, particularly comparing it to film and TV, is it's live. Like, we're doing it live, and it's exciting to be there with the audience and to see their response and have their reaction. And going city to city and doing the same show, it was so interesting to see how different cities responded to the show, how again, and also just doing a show for so long, it's a weird form of torture, in a sense of, like, you're saying the same words, making the same hand motions every day. And I think the beautiful, exciting thing about theater is, like, how you bring your life to that, even though you're saying the same words and doing the same thing every day for a long period of time. It's like, where can I find the fun today and the excitement today and the life today that I have currently? A great teacher taught me in college. We would always come to class and she would be like, "What's your willingness number today?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Like, what if my willingness number today is 0? Like, what if I'm just not in, I show up to Anastasia and I'm just like, this is the last thing I want to do today." And granted, we're human. There are days that you're just like, I don't feel great today. Whether it be, personal or mental or whatever, it's like, sometimes you just don't feel great. And it's the excitement, I believe, in theater is that we can still come together, audience and, performers, and engage in this experience, that even if I'm at a willingness number of 0, that we can still enjoy and come together. And it really 9 out of 10 times brings my willingness number up and the excitement up. So that's why I keep doing it.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah.
So as somebody who entered the industry at a fairly young age, how did you keep yourself from getting overwhelmed by just like the competition and the atmosphere?
Yeah, that's very important, because again, 9 out of 10 times in this business, you're going to hear no, which is hard, especially as a kid. And I think it could really, take down someone's self-esteem. And, I think it's very important to remember that you can't compare yourself to anyone else. You are the only one that matters. Not in like a, selfish kind of conceited way, but again, you can't compare your talent to anyone else's. And when you're going into these audition rooms, I mean, Anastasia, namely, like, there was a bunch of kids in the callback, and we're all sitting in the same room in Telsey & Co.'s office. And I'm looking around and be like, what makes me the guy who's going to get this role? And why should I? And even more so, putting it, to when I was literally on stage at the Pantages, I'm like, there were people in the cast around me who were older and who were more experienced than I was as a performer or an actor, or who had more credits or whatever that is, So why should I be the one who's leading the show right now? As opposed to them who's playing my understudy. And I think, again, the big key is just giving yourself permission to do the work that you know how to do, and do it to the best that you can at that time. And that is the best that you can do. And you, again, can't compare yourself to everyone else. I think what it has done, it has prepared me for more real life things, getting older, especially when I was younger, hearing no so many times, that, life isn't always going to hand you things. And also you need to sort of smile in the face of adversity, and keep looking towards the next best thing, the next excitement, and looking forward to whatever project will be next once you do get that no, and that you have to move on. Yeah, so I think it really built my character in terms of that going forward, and just the mindset towards the business. And sort of, again, it works for anything in life. So it's not just, entertainment industry.
Nice. Morgan has a question in the comments. Since you have such little rehearsal time, how do you find ways to connect with your fellow castmates and build those believable dynamics?
That's a very good question. It was hard in the beginning because, again, I was the only change in the cast. Everyone else had signed longer contracts after all being together for the first year of the tour. So they all have this history, these friendships, these hardships, these whatever. So that was hard because I'm coming in here being like, hi guys, I'm the new guy, what's up? And granted, there's a benefit to being the only new guy because everyone wanted to, meet the new guy. And, obviously when that new guy is also leading, the show and is a principal character, it's nice to get to know them because also they bring up a lot of the life of the show and, are, again, a significant part of the show. And it's very, telling as an audience member, I believe, to watch a show and see the relationships built in to these characters. Particularly creating my relationship with Lila Coogan, which again, I fall in love with on stage every night. We had to just take some time in terms of like getting to know each other, partly also just doing the show together every night. But it's just a matter of like taking time and setting time aside for when you aren't working and aren't at work to like, hey, you want to go get lunch? Do you want to, just talk? And again, build these relationships so that when we're on stage and we have the banter in the beginning of the show where we're, yelling at each other a little bit and sort of playing fun and then obviously fast forwarding to when we fall in love towards the end. So I think it was very helpful sort of, again, taking that time aside. Me and Ed, who played Vlad, again, who we have this grand history in the show as Dmitry and Vlad, we would play tennis every week, depending on which city we were in, because he had toured before in a bunch of shows, Phantom of the Opera and some others. So he sort of knew these cities and he had all these tennis places that we would take lessons together, we would play together, and so we created our relationship very well and very fast because we sort of bonded on that. And little things like that, where again, you eat, sleep, and breathe with these people because, especially in a tour situation, because you're traveling and doing everything with them. And so you create really strong relationships, which then obviously transfer to the stage.
Jackie put a question in the chat. What is a way that you think I can start auditioning for things? I live in Minnesota, so there's not big auditions and no films being made, no big musicals. So how do I get myself out there?
Yeah, Minnesota is not New York or LA. And that's definitely, those are just two cities that have major hubs of musical theater. However, there is always, no matter what city. And that was, I think, also part of the amazing thing of traveling to cities on tour, is seeing these, for lack of a better word, random towns and random cities. I'm not saying Minnesota is one of a random, place, but seeing these sort of, less populated areas still have really strong appreciation and theater base. I'm trying to think of a good one. Cleveland, Ohio. I didn't know that they had so many, theaters. And again, our theater that we performed there was packed every night, and they were so excited for us to be in town. That to say, Minnesota, as many, as well as every other town across the country, I believe, truly within your tri-state area has some kind of theater base. And again, like even the theaters that I named in Los Angeles, some of them are very small and, family owned sometimes. And they have a lot of those in smaller towns. And I just definitely encourage you to like just search like theater in your area. Obviously not right now, but even now. And I think what the exciting part and where, theater has opened this whole new space of virtual and online and things. So no matter where you are, you can do theater, even if there really isn't a theater in your area. But again, I truly believe that no matter where you are, there is some kind of small regional theater. And again, even growing up on Long Island, yes, I had the city at my fingertips, being, only about a half hour outside of New York City. But I did the Cultural Arts Playhouse on Long Island. It was where I did majority of my shows growing up. And it's again this small, like almost a room where they do theater, and I did a bunch of shows there. And again, it was just the practice. And again, if there's really nothing, looking up monologues on the internet and just studying monologues, practicing them and saying them out loud, and again, learning songs. This is all work that you can do by yourself, even if there really is no theater opportunities in your area.
Good points.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't mind going over just a little bit, I was going to do a little speed round of questions for you.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
All right. Favorite snack?
Favorite snack? Man. I don't know. I'm not really like a snacker, but I love like chips.
Okay. Favorite audition song?
As cheesy as it is, Corner of the Sky from Pippin. I think it's a great song.
That's legit. Dream show to be in?
Definitely 10 out of 10 every time, Wicked. It's really just on the list of things to do.
Okay. What's in the special skills section of your resume?
Spinning plates.
Ooh.
Yes.
I love that one because everybody has something odd.
Yes, and I actually got to do it in when I was, in the original off-Broadway show. When I was 10, they had me spin plates in the show.
Oh, that's great. Okay, last one. Funniest thing that ever happened on or backstage?
There was this time we got in trouble or I got in trouble for it, but and again, this is like, the bridge between we're all human, it's real life, and yes, it is all very professional, but at the same time, we're having a good time. We're a bunch of theater nerds getting together to do theater, and that's the beautiful part. But backstage, there's this time at the end of the show where I'm not on stage, but the Romanovs and the Russian soldiers or the rebels, I guess, are coming in contact. And so it's like the soldiers are aiming at the Romanov royal family. And what's happening sort of on the foyer or the main stage is Gleb and Anya or Anastasia having their ordeal where, he's about to kill her. I don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen this story, but that's sort of what's happening on the main. But in the back, sort of behind a lot of things, is that sort of the Romanovs and the standoff between the Romanovs and the soldiers. And I was always off stage because I have to go on pretty soon after that. And I'm behind the soldiers facing, so the Romanovs are facing me and they can see me, but I'm behind stage so the audience can't see me. So what I would do would be mouthing the words that Anya or Gleb are saying on stage. And different departments started getting involved. We had the costume department and the wig department involved. I would come on in a full wig and dress sometimes and be behind the soldiers just being, Anastasia. This was to obviously make the Romanovs on the other end, which again, also our friends and coworkers, laugh. This went on for a while, and we sort of, each week we would get more intricate with our costume design and wig design and have a great time with it. Our stage manager definitely shut it down after it got too intricate because too many people were involved. And again, it was, quote unquote, I guess you can say unprofessional. And so, but we all had a great time and it was all in good fun. And it was probably the silliest stuff we had going on backstage.
That's great. That's the kind of stuff that builds those relationships that Morgan was talking about, though.
Exactly. And what, really bridges the gap between like all the times that I had as a kid growing up doing theater of like, again, having fun with my castmates and where I guess it wasn't fully professional work at the time, but you know, even in the professional space, in the professional world, we can all still have a good time and still just, again, a bunch of theater nerds getting together to do some theater, which is, you know, what I hope to keep doing.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing this class for us. We really appreciate it. And I think it was, I don't know, what do you guys think? Was it pretty useful?
Fun, yeah. Well, yeah, 'cause I would love to do more of these. I'm also now starting to get into doing like private lessons and like one-on-one Zooms, if that's something that people are interested, particularly for you know, college audition prep and just honestly regular audition prep. But add me on, also just if you have more questions or anything, you know, post this, definitely add me on Instagram. It's just official Jake Levy, Levy, Levy. And yeah, just definitely reach out if you have any more questions or you think of a question tomorrow or whatever. And or if you're interested in privates or anything like that, I would definitely love to be able to do that for you guys.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give a quick plug. Let me stop the recording here.
Yeah.